So, Sally, I was very curious in what you were saying to me a moment ago about how power and privilege
Mm.
come into play with presence, and I'd be curious to learn more.
Mm. Yeah, it's an interesting new aspect, I guess, of the work Marianne and I are doing at the moment. Um, if I go back to Will and Grace, that formulation, and think most of us have some awareness of when we are or are not using our power. I think it's, if you like, it's an explicit strategy that when we feel powerful and or potent, we are expressing something as a push into the world where we're trying to make an impact or leave a footprint. And sometimes I can have wanted to do that and be aware after an event that I perhaps didn't use my power as fully as I wanted to. Um, and then obviously there's the discourse on power over, power with, how we're using it. I think the interesting part about privilege is it sits on the grace dimension as aspects of our being that are gifted to us for good or for ill, and probably are lying there in the ground. I You and I discussed what's it like to be the older, straight, white, able-bodied
Yes.
man in a team, particularly if you are the only person who's speaking maybe English, and English is the somehow agreed language of the organization. And, what does that give you that is out of your awareness, but fully in the eyes of sort of observable by everybody else? And that dimension is something that at the moment I find coaching on very interesting, because it's often the awareness of our privilege is associated with huge shame somehow
Yeah.
about what we've been given, and the realization of what that has enabled us to do in the wider field.
So, with that in mind, and all the um, recent awareness around Me Too and Black Lives Matter and other really, really important issues which are raising these thoughts of mine, what would be a call to action for leaders of organisations from your perspective?
Well, what we're suggesting is that people look at the SOS framework, that there's personal work for all of us to do here around getting in touch with what privilege do I have in any particular field. And then as we come into relationship, how is that privilege landing when you and I sit in this situation together? So looking at teams, project teams, teams in different parts of the world, as an English speaker, I have this huge privilege of being able to go to most countries in the world where English is spoken or understood, and also where in the history of that country, probably, the Brits, we've charged in and colonized something at some point.
Yes.
And that's given us a particular historical past. Now, we may say none of that is explicit in our presence here and now, but in conditions of ground that exist, in how we do business and how my assumptions are brought forward when other assumptions might not be, particularly global, cross-cultural countries, companies, organizations. I think that's a real theme that we would be looking at and thinking, how have we put into our structure conditions of privilege that are outside of any one person's awareness?
Yes, and that's a challenge which I imagine is going to be something really quite thought-provoking for many organisations right now.
Yes, quite a long-term and delicate agenda.
Yeah. Yes, and it also brings to mind Barry Oshry's work on seeing systems as well, and
Yes.
tops, middles, and bottoms.
Yes. 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 One way to look at it. Yes.
Thank you, Sally. That's been really interesting.